음. 네, 안녕하세요. 반갑습니다. 또 오늘 이렇게 한국이라면 되게 늦은 시간, 밤 11시가 넘었는데요. 네, 참여해 주셔서 너무 감사드립니다. 어, 오늘은 소개해 드릴 분이 컬멜하고 허슨인데요. 컬멜이 엄마이고 허슨은 아들입니다. 그래서 둘이서 되게 재밌는 삶을 살고 계세요. 그래서 아까 말씀드렸듯이 그런 고정관념에서, 그러니까 outside the box thinking을 삶을 되게 주도하고 계시고, 또 그 아들을 위해서 그렇게 만들었어요. 근데 저도 아들 셋을 키우면서 좀 많이 목적하는 거지만, 저도 개인적으로 그랬지만 아들과 엄마랑 이렇게 사이 좋은 요 나이 때 만 17살, 그 막 사춘기 같은 거 지나고 막 청소년 되고 딱 그 나이 때 아들과 엄마랑 그렇게 친하게 너무 사이가 좋고 사랑하면서 그런 거 모습을 보는 게 흔하지는 않거든요. 그래서 저도 그 모습이 되게 놀라웠고, 그리고 지금 현재는 그 인테그리티 이코노미라는 그것을 약간 창립을 하셨고, 또 인간의 잠재력을 살리기 위해서 전 세계를 돌아다니는 여정을 이제 펼쳐왔어요. 그래서 지금 허슨 같은 경우는 뭐 개인 소개를 좀 이따 하겠지만은 17살이고 만 17살이고 지금 대학교를 다니고 있습니다. 벌써 4개 학위를 취득을 했고, 영어와 스페인을 유창하게 구사를 하고 있지만, 또 거기다가 한국어와 아랍어를 배우고 있어요. 그래서 아마 조금 있다가 허슨이 한국어로도 조금 얘기를 하고 소개를 할 수 있을 것 같아요. 그래서 한국어를 배우기 시작한 지 1년이 되었는데 네, 그래도 좀 많이 되게 열심히 하고 있는 걸로 알고 있습니다. 그 외에도 뭐 다이빙, 빵꾸기, 뭐 살사 댄스 이런 취미들 가지고 있고, 네, 그래서 오늘 이렇게 모신 이유는 이제 저희가 아이들 다 키우고 계시는데, 여기다 보니 한 대부분 한 3살에서 10살 아이의 부모님들이 대부분이신 것 같아요. 아무래도 지금 이렇게 하고 있는 게 맞는 건가라고 고민하시는 분이 굉장히 많으실 것 같습니다. 세상은 정말 빨리 변하고 있는데, 그게 기술도 변하고 있지만 이 뭐 환경이라던가 사회적인 문제 같은 것도 좀 심각해지면서 이게 지금 내가 하고 있는 방식이 맞는 건가, 뭔가 좀 다르게 해야 되지 않나, 뭐 모든 사람들이 똑같은 것을 추구하고 이렇게 돌리는, 특히 막 학원 돌린다고 그러죠. 그런 거를 살고 있는데 이게 맞는 건가? 라고 고민하시는 분이 많으실 것 같아요. 그래서 혹시나 해서 호기심이 있으셔서 여기 찾으신 분들 많으실 거라고 생각을 합니다. 그래서 오늘은 이분의 스토리를 소개를 해드리면서 많은 것을 들어보시고, 물론 미국에서 또 세상을 여러 군데 돌아다니면서 생활하신 거와 또 한국에서 사는 거라면 다르지만, 그래도 네, 진짜 이 고정관념에서 벗어나기 위해서는 다른 스토리, 다른 관점, 뭐 이런 얘기도 많이 들어보시는 게 또 중요할 것 같아서 이런 자리를 마련했습니다. 그러면 아까 말씀드린 대로 카메라를 키실 수 있으신 분은 꼭 켜주시고, 아이가 뭐 자거나 또 그러지 못할 환경이시면 어쩔 수 없지만, 그러면 꼭 적어도 그 대화창을 이용하셔서 질문이라던가 그 코멘트를 꼭 중간중간에 달아주시면 감사하겠습니다. Okay, so without further ado, do you want to briefly introduce yourself? Because I already did. I went through your Carmel. I went through your introduction. Both of you actually.
Yeah.
So if you want to go ahead and just add a few more things, or maybe Hudson, you want to now try your Korean.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
내 이름은 Hudson. 아, 아, 한국 이분은 이름은 Carmell, and we are very thankful to be here today. This is my Maverick Mama. We've had like you said, an out-of-the-box educational method for my entire life. And as I'm eyeing universities to go to for next year, it's just going to be fun today to break down our journey that we've taken to get here so far. And yeah, we're just grateful to be here.
And I think since you introduced us, I know that we don't have a lot of time, Sam, so I don't kind of want to go into too much of if you took care of that. I don't want to take up time with that. And I also think that because since you had us on last year, you know, things have, it's been interesting as Hudson's mom to see again in hindsight where his education since he was 4, you know, and that's when I decided to homeschool and global school and officially do things differently when he was 4. But even since you had us on last year, it's been interesting to see the progression of that and kind of how the dominoes, how they fell. And like you said, as he's working toward figuring out, you know, where he's going to finish university and things like that. And, you know, with the language and the different things that are values and things like that. So I don't know, I guess I could start there and just kind of a reflection, if that's okay with you, Sam,
Yeah,
of
sounds
what's been
good.
going on.
Yeah, sounds good. And also, I think, just give me 1 second. 이 줌에서 기술들이 정말 발달한 것 같아요. 줌에서 2가지 기능이 있는데, 이거 자막을 키실 수도 있고, 이거를 한국어로 아마 통역이 실시간으로 되는지는 모르겠어요. 그게 가능할 수도 있고, 아니면 자막을 키실 수도 있으시고요. 이 내용 정리를 하는 그 인공지능 기능도 있습니다. 그래서 그거는 제가 나중에 보내드리겠습니다. 그래서 소개해드린 대로 예, 일단 4살부터 그 홈스쿨을 하셨어요. 그래서 혼자서 키우시고 또 진짜 세계를 돌아다니시면서 키우셨습니다. 그래서 그런 약간 과정과 또 시행착오도 되게 많으셨고 그런 거에 대해서 아마 얘기를 하실 겁니다. 그래서 말씀드린 대로 질문이 있으시거나 하시고 싶은 말씀이 있으시면 꼭 대화창을 이용하셔서 네, 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. Okay, so you could begin. Go ahead. But Carmell, don't make it too long because I do have to translate in between. Yeah, and you're muted. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I guess that really, this is kind of starting in the middle here. I'll talk about globe schooling, and I want to address Minji's comment as well. I'll kind of do this in the same thing. Yes, I chose to homeschool Hudson, but it was different than just kind of homeschooling that you may have read about. I didn't just subscribe to a traditional education as in the public school system or the private school system, nor did I go completely homeschool. I ended up really kind of designing my own method along the way. And I followed and learned from the shoulders of giants like Maria Montessori, Reggio Emilia philosophy, you know, different things like that. But it was more about futuring, I guess. I saw that there were things that I knew were going to be incredibly important as I was cultivating this young man, like empathy, emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence. And I wanted to kind of move toward that, I guess, as opposed to moving away from everywhere else. And so that's why I started to just create what happened, what is now. Is that okay to pause there? You want me to keep going?
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, you could pause there. 그래서 네, 중요한 것은 제가 일일이 다 번역은 제가 통역은 정확히는 못할 수도 있습니다. 놓치는 게 있을 수도 있지만은 중요한 것은 아이가 이제 4살부터 그 홈스쿨링을 시작했는데 그냥 기본적인 그런 모두가 다 하는 홈스쿨링을 따라 하시지는 않으셨어요. 그래서 좀 이렇게 아카데믹한 면보다도 아무래도 그런 감성이라던가 이 문화 지능 같은 거 이런 거에 좀 더 집중을 좀 더 많이 하셨고 약간 거기에 뿌리가 약간 이렇게 박힌 그러한 학습을 하셨었어요. 그래서 그러니까 어떤 게 우리한테 제일 중요한가를 되게 많이 고민을 하시고 이게 그냥 단순히 약간 공부한다기보다도 이 아이가 어떤 생각을 하고 어떤 감성을 가지고 있고 어떤 느낌을 가지고 있는지 그런 거에 집중을 되게 많이 하시는 그러한 커리큘럼으로 약간 홈스쿨링을 하셨습니다. 네, 그리고 참, 인현님께서 또 제가 도움을 부탁을 해드렸는데, 제가 놓치는 부분도 있을 수가 있어서, 네, 대화창에다가 이렇게 적어주시니까 그것도 같이 보시면 될 것 같습니다. Go ahead.
And I think that, and addressing Minji's comment earlier about wanting to raise her children in a creative way with the world being the way that it was, and in order for our kids to be able to just handle not only the change that is happening, but the rate at which things are changing is so much different for all of us across the globe. It doesn't matter. Like the rate at which things are changing. And I think that that's such a huge point, Minji, is that raising our children to be adaptable and not be, you know, afraid of technology or afraid of what's going on out there, you know, instead being able to kind of roll with it more so and be able to adapt for themselves in that moment and thrive. And so now I'll rewind back to the homeschooling thing. We're reticent to call it homeschooling often. And I'm going to talk just for a minute and then let Sam translate. And then we're going to hear, if that's okay, what Hudson, like his assessment of what all of this has been. But we started global schooling, and I called it that before it was even a thing, because it was about the world. It was about this beautiful marble that we live upon. And it was about understanding another language and being able to communicate and build relational capital across the world. And so languages were very important at a young age. But also, in the United States, sometimes homeschooling is seen as anarchist or really crazy out of the box, or sometimes a little bit not wanting to do academia. Now, this isn't the truth for everybody. It's very diverse. But for us, academia was very important. So I wanted to make sure that I not only had the freedom to design his education the way that I wanted to, and ultimately the way that Hudson wanted to, but also to be ready for academia. So I created my own private school. I found that I really loved what was going on. I dove into designing curricula with a lot of neuroscience folded in, and then continued on with that. And so then he graduated my high school at 13 and went on to college. And so where we're at in that journey is that Hudson's achieved 4 associate's degrees, summa cum laude. That just happened this June. And now he's going to go ahead and I think he's going to finish university and move on. You know, you're looking at different universities. I'll let you tell that. But I think the key here is that no matter what system was out there, I wasn't going to just raise him in a system because those were my options. It was kind of like the mama bear, papa bear porridge. Like, this one's too hot, this one's too cold. I needed to keep searching for the right bowl of porridge that was just right. And that just right is different for everyone. I just was relentless until I figured out what it was. And back to Minji's point, it's the adaptability along the way. We had to change it. We had life throw curveballs. You know, it was their children change, their brains develop at certain rates. Boys versus girls is different. And I took all of that into account in order to give him the tools to adapt. It was always about him. It was never about me. I'll stop there.
Okay, so Avery's mom is supporting us, thankfully, and she's like doing a real-time translation by text. So, 네, 인형님께서 감사하게도 이제 번역을 해주시고 계신데 채트를 보시면 기본적인 내용은 들으실 수 있고 저는 그냥 조금 썸머리를 해드리겠습니다. 그래서 저는 이 카멜님, 어머님께서 그 신경과학에 대해서 굉장히 네, 집중을 하셔서. 그러니까 특히 아들이 약간 아들의 두뇌 개발과 또 그 자라는 성장하는 그 시기와 또 딸과 또 그 나이와 환경에 따라서 다 다르거든요. 그래서 학교를 설립을 하셨는데 결국에는 약간 그 아들에 맞는 학교를 약간 그런 커리큘럼을 만들어 주셨습니다. 그래서 그게 아무래도 좀 제일 인상 깊은 것 같습니다. 그래서 저는 조금 더 이렇게 진행을 하도록 질문을 해드리고 또 중간에 모르시는 부분이 있으면 저 채트에도 적어주시고 인형님 너무 감사합니다. 번역을 해주셔서. Okay, so I actually have a question. So Carmell, did you what type of education did you grow up in? Like, why did you begin to think this way when Hudson was 4? Why did you begin to think that sort of you needed to pivot away from the traditional education model?
I grew up with a traditional education, public school education. It was very much about my worth was rooted in my grades, period. And that's the way it was, and that's okay. I excelled in school because that's where my worth was, you know, and I guess it's only, you know, in the past, since I've been raising him, I realized that was also important, but my worth didn't need to be solely rooted in what my grades were. And I think back, like, what if I, as a child, had a foundation of self-confidence and self-worth first, instead of keeping up with what somebody else wanted me to? If I just, not that keeping up with the grades and the exams and all of that is a terrible thing, but I just think if we can really, really root in our kids that they are worthy as they are when in the womb, as they come out of the womb, they are pure. And I think, what if we just reinforced that more and more and more? Then they're going to excel even more, because they have that self to tether to, you know, not grandpa's expectations, or not, you know, so-and-so went here, so you have to do it too. And so I guess that's part of that. And it's interesting, Sam, I hadn't really looked at my own education as a comparison, but I'm sure that came from it as well. And then, as far as, I think you said, and how did we start this? And Hudson can go ahead and tell that story. And it's a huge,
It's a really awesome story. If you
thing.
want to take a minute to translate that though first, we can do that.
Yeah, no, Avery's mom is doing a great job of doing real-time translation. She's putting that in chat, so that's why I could sort of concentrate more on moderating than translating.
Lovely. I'll carry on then. So when I was 3 and was it 3 or 4?
4.
4. When I was 4, and when we used to live in Los Angeles, we were walking along the Santa Monica beach one day, and we both saw something on the shore, and it was clear, it was gel-like, it looked like a jellyfish, but it was more rectangular. We had never seen it before. So being the adventurous mom and son duo that we are, mom asked me to pick it up. We inspected it. We tried to.
It was dead.
It was dead. It was dead, and it was small, so we could pick it up. And we ended up bringing it back home, and we tried to do research on it. So this is where all the critical thinking and, you know, finding the right porridge comes into play early on in my childhood. So mom asked me to research on my own using our computer what salinity the ocean at our local habitat was, and recreate that salinity in a little tin pan so we could preserve the specimen of this, whatever this jellyfish thing was, in this little pan. And then she asked me to research the currents of the Pacific Ocean and see what could have been brought up into the shoreline. And long story short, I couldn't find anything. So what both of us did, and what mom had me do, was put together a list of questions to go to the local Santa Monica aquarium and ask one of the experts there and try and get an answer out of them. So we drove over, and with the little salp in the tin, this little alien looking thing in the tin, and my list of questions, and my mom behind me, I went in and I found an expert. And then I began to ask them questions. They were a little stumped. They also didn't know what this thing was. But the really cool thing was that as I was asking these questions, a group of kids my age and other parents that were at the aquarium started to gather around and listen into what was kind of becoming a speech of questions, really, from my end. And basically, the experts ended up speaking with each other, and after a few minutes, they figured out it was something called a salp, which is normally at the hadal depth in the ocean, which means it's tens of thousands of feet deep. It should have never washed up on the shore, but it did because of a certain Pacific current that was happening at that moment in 2009, 2010. So that's just an early on example of how it's an elementary example of how she instilled critical thinking, how we had public speaking, we had neuroscience, we had marine biology, we had salinity research, all of these things coming in just to answer one question. So in the ordinary, and just on happenstance, we ended up creating an entire lesson out of it. And that just,
that was the beginning. And if I can share one thing on go ahead. Just one thing. If you're starting to do different kinds of lessons for your children, right? That's when I knew. I thought, wow, here we are having a cool moment on the beach, and I could build anything, frankly, from like calculus to, you know, to baking. I'm exaggerating, but I could build so many things off of that one tiny occurrence.
And pull a tangent.
And pull a tangent. And it was just tangential education. And that's when I knew, okay, I can do this. We can do this. And that was the moment. It was pretty cool.
Quick question. You said you did this when you were 4?
Yes, 4.
You remember when you were 4?
I do. The earliest memory I have is actually my 3rd
Wow.
birthday. Yeah, so that's
okay. So you're definitely talented in that regard. Okay. So I don't really remember when I was 4.
no. Well, it's
Yeah.
probably because I'm younger too, so it's closer for me.
Sure,
Not to,
sure.
you're an old. You guys aren't old. I'm not,
Sure.
but,
Thank you.
but it's closer for me. So I might forget it in a few years too. But yeah.
Yeah. That sounds good. Let me just do a quick talk around this, if you don't mind.
Of course.
네, 그래서 인현님께서 또 번역을 또 너무 잘 주셔서 너무 감사드립니다. 근데 중요한 것은 진짜 요 하나의 그 그냥 일상에서 같이 바닷가를 해변가를 걷다가 무슨 죽은 그 물체를 약간 보고 그거를 통해서 정말 모든 것을 지금 한 케이스잖아요. 그래서 이거를 일단은 검색해보고 왜 이게 도대체 무엇인지 이게 해파리인가 아닌가라고 고민하다가 아닌 것 같기도 하고 그래서 그걸 검색을 했는데 해파리 같지는 않고 그러다 보니까 그렇다면은 이런 것을 뭐라 그럴까 저기 수족관에 가가지고 거기 사람들한테 뭐 물어보자라고 해가지고 그렇다면 물어보려면 어떠한 질문을 던져야 될까라고 그걸 생각하게끔 하고 그리고 가서 직접 그걸 또 물어보니까 네, 웬만한 사람들 다 몰랐다고 하죠 처음에는 그래서 약간 그런 것들을 다 이렇게 해 나가면서 결국에는 이게 해류라고 그러나요? 그 커런트를 통해 가지고 깊은 바다에 있어야 될 게 여기에 와 있는 것 그러니까 그 해변가에 이렇게 와서 죽어 있는 것 자체가 되게 흔하지 않는 그런 경우다라는 걸 알게 되고 근데 요 레슨 하나로만 통해서도 진짜 많은 그 융합적인 것을 할 수 있다는 게 제일 네, 중요한 것 같아요. 근데 그거를 중요한 건 만 4살에 했다고 그러고 그 4살에 했던 것을 기억한다고 하네요. 근데 어떻게 보면은 그 두뇌 그 연구하시는 분에 물어보면은 이렇게 뭔가 딱 이런 트라우마도 있지만 또 반면에 또 이러한 거에 대해서 그러니까 뭔가 이렇게 특별한 것을 했을 때 그런 게 기억에 잘 남는다고 또 하잖아요. 그래서 이렇게 일상 안에서도 뭔가 그냥 같이 돌아다니면서 이걸 보는 것을 어떤 관점으로 그걸로 또 무엇을 할 수 있을까? 그래서 결국에는 이거를 토대로 홈스쿨링과 또 이 약간 본인만의 학교를 만드시게 된 계기가 된 것 같아요. 왜냐면은 정말 깊고 되게 진짜 풍부한 그런 교육을 요 하나의 그 그냥 같이 산책하다가 그 본 경험으로 진짜 많은 것을 할 수가 있었기 때문에 네, 그걸로 토대로 결국에는 그 홈스쿨링 하시게 된 것 같습니다. Alright, go ahead.
And I guess if I could also share 2 gems, because again, Hudson's 17 now, like he's moving and it's really fun to be able to look back at like when he was the age of most of your children. And it's so incredible to be able to share and actually recognize some of the things now, because when I was doing this, I was just in it and I poured in so vigilantly that it was, people would ask me to kind of share my secrets at the time and I couldn't so much because I was doing it and I was immersed in it. So I love to be able to share it now, but back in that moment on the beach, when that was the revelation, there are 2 things that I still do today. And I know, and I can see Hudson now and know that they were gems as far as like values for him. One of the things was I kept asking him questions about this creature. And I kept saying, what are keywords that you would use to search? You tell me what you think. And I learned this in the Reggio Emilia philosophy, that you keep asking the child questions. Don't always answer their questions. Like hey mom, why is the sky blue? You know, and you answer it. Instead, I don't know, why do you think the sky is blue? And I continue to translate that and use that over many, many things throughout the course of raising Hudson, to the point where frankly he got pissed sometimes, because he's like, would you just answer the question and, you know, help me out here? And oftentimes I would say, no, you can figure it out. Let's see what you think. As I'm doing this, it wasn't just to be ornery or to, you know, kind of make him feel pressured. It was to show him, like, look how valuable you are. You can think your way through this, and I know you can. That was a huge, huge thing that I learned from another philosophy that I applied to Hudson, that I'd say today is great, because now he observes, and he has, you know, and he thinks his way through something, as opposed to just going and getting the insta answer, you know, which is, and I think that's a super good trait. And I'd say that the other piece was that about that moment, it was the thinking. I lost it. I lost that one. I'll come back to it. But I just, those certain, with the lessons, that's what it was. I built a lesson around this ocean creature, right? But what I always did was make Hudson the center of it. If he was interested in something, he was very interested in James Bond, incredibly interested in James Bond from a very young age, I think 7 or something. And so what I would do is I would use that to my advantage, and I'd go, okay, so what do we get into? We get into things like velocity. We get into filming and different film angles, right?
Cinematography, men's fashion and style,
geography and travel, language, geopolitics. You can get into conversations, which, Sam, you know that Hudson's huge into geopolitics. So, you know, my point is I would support him where he was and build something in that. And I would kind of make the education that I knew he needed to have, but I would meet him where he was. And that's another thing that I think we've continued to do.
Yeah, similar to a student or child driven education at the core of it, like you said.
Yeah. Definitely want to answer questions, so I don't want to keep talking. I want to make sure that if there are questions, we want to answer all of them.
네, sounds good. 예, 지금 번역을 계속 해주시고 굉장히 너무 감사합니다. 예, 그냥 이게 진짜 대화 하나로서 하늘의 하늘 색깔에 대해서 얘기하는 것부터 해서 아들이 007 영화를 되게 좋아했다. 그렇죠. 제임스 본드 007 영화를 좋아했고 그 안에서도 속도라던가 지정학이라던가 이런 다양한 컨텐츠가 나와서 그걸 알아보고 얘기해보고 이런 부분이 제일 인상 깊은 것 같아요. 그리고 여기서 제일 제가 느끼는 것은 인내심이 부모님이 제일 필요하다고 생각이 되네요. 딱 아이가 그러니까 그냥 무조건 질문을 물어봤을 때 그거에 대한 빠른 대답을 해주는 게 아니고 질문을 다시 물어보셨잖아요. Why라고 물어보시면 Why do you think? 라고 이런 식으로 질문을 물어보면서 아이를 계속 생각하게 하고 또 그 별거 아닌 것 같은 영화 하나를 보던 그러니까 그 일상에서 그냥 하늘색을 왜 파래요? 라고 물은 거 가지고도 뭔가 이렇게 깊게 이어서 또 할 수 있다는 게 그 대화를 할 수 있다는 게 정말 많은 인내심이 필요하시구나라고 저는 느꼈습니다. No, I'm just telling everybody that probably requires lots of patience on your part, Carmell, to be able to ask those right questions yourself and not just give simple answers, right? No, that's what I just told everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Lots of patience, yes, but let's not be fooled. There are many times that I've been impatient. You know,
of course.
We're all parents, right? We're all parents, regardless of how we choose to educate. And we've got to remember that part of it. And we've got to give ourselves grace there too. You know, we're trying to figure this out and doing the best thing for our kids as well. And it's not perfect for anybody. And I think that when we share that, then it's kind of like, you know, it lets us unfurl a little bit, but.
Okay. There's a question in the chat. So so when the kid asks like why is the sky blue, you let him let Hudson find the answer, right? So when do you actually give the answer, or or did you give the answer ever? Or so what did Hudson, what did you exactly do to get the answer?
Yeah, in that moment, I had obviously a conversation with my mom, but I also turned to my books. My books were a great resource for me as a kid, and they are still today. But I've had this massive encyclopedia for probably over 10 years now, and it has all of these photos. It's astrological, it's biological, it has all the genres of like human science all packed into one book, so I loved it. But I turned to the section where it spoke about the stars and it spoke about the atmosphere and the different layers of the barosphere and just what the Earth was comprised of. And then I'd already learned about clouds, and I was able to piece together what was happening at that time. I believe I don't remember it perfectly, but
did I leave you alone to go do
no,
that?
No.
Okay.
She was
Didn't leave him
there.
alone.
She was there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think is that it inspired a conversation.
Yeah, you're not just telling me to like shut
See you
up.
later.
Yeah, shut up and go find it out. I don't care. It was more of like it was to inspire a conversation, to inspire a spark within me that then went to ask her questions, that then went to go to my books and just be able to use my brain in a more enhanced way.
To be resourceful, you know,
Yeah.
and I think as parents too, a lot of times we just don't know. Like, oh my gosh, have I learned so much? I think I should have another degree because of just everything I've learned from this guy. Like, I've learned so much. And then again, empowering him. So often Hudson would learn something or know something, and he would share it with me, and he would see that I was genuinely magnetized and genuinely like, wow, you just taught me something, even at a very young age. And if you can think of how much that empowers your child, that they got to take command and control and actually teach you something, you know, like I said earlier, as soon as we can just admit we're not these omnipotent beings, and we're, you know, that our kids are like, oh, wow, you're human too. I can teach you. This goes two ways. Of course it does, you know. And with the sky question too, and I did just use that as a general thing, but you can definitely get into philosophical values, right? You can definitely get into quantum physics. You know, there are things that you can get into that just makes them think even more, to kind of pull the thread and see where do they go with it? And then where they go with it, you kind of follow it and go, oh, okay, I see what they're drawn to.
Yeah.
Let's follow that up with some more support.
결국에는 진짜 대화를 많이 하는 게 제일 중요한 것 같네요. 그리고 아이도 부모에게 가르쳐 줄 수도 있고, 부모도 또 아이를 통해서 배울 수 있다는 점이 여기에 핵심 포인트인 것 같습니다. 그래서 이게 일방으로 또 이거를 그러니까 이거를 알아보고 네가 배워라고 이러는 게 아니고, 아이를 통해서 부모도 아, 그럴 수가 있나, 약간 이런 거를 느낄 수 있을 만큼, 또 아이도 그러면서, 그게 어떻게 보면 아이 주도 교육인 거죠. 아이가 그러니까 교육에서, 교육 그 공학에서는 제일 꼭대기가 있어요. 그러니까 아이가, 아니면 학생이 이제 무엇을 배웠을 때 얼마큼 그거를 이해를 하고 마스터를 했는지, 그 약간 계단 같은 게 있습니다. 거기서 꼭대기가 남을 가르쳐 줄 수 있을 때예요. 그래서 그런 부분이 제일 중요한 것 같아요. 그러니까 아이도 부모님에게, 내가 부모님, 엄마한테 아빠한테 뭔가, 엄마 아빠한테 모르는 걸 내가 가르쳐 줄 수 있다는 거, 그런 거를 느끼는 게 하는 게 여기서 제일 중요한 포인트인 것 같습니다. How old were you when you did this, by the way? The sky discussion.
That
Do you
was
remember?
early on.
Like 8, something like that.
Yeah, 7,
You
8.
still have that book.
I still should I?
That book is
I
like
still have the
on our shelf.
encyclopedia. Yeah.
Okay. 8살 때, 8 years old. Okay, that's great.
Eugene asked if I said the name properly. I hope that I did. Eugene.
유진님. 네.
Eugene. That's how did I do the private school thing? And I just want to I can take time for that later, but I'll just give a quick on that. I lived in California. California was very supportive of homeschooling, and in general, the US is more supportive of homeschooling than Korea, from what I understand. You know, I know that we have a lot of options for that here. And a lot of states are more supportive than others. So that was my number one choice. I knew that I had to live in a state that would support an independent education that was outside of the system. And in short, I completely worked the system. Very honest. There was an option to start your own private school, so I did that. There was also an option you could either test your child or you could not test your child. It was your choice in California. I had Hudson do tests because I wanted him, if he chose in high school, that he said, you know, I'm kind of tired of homeschooling, I want to go to high school. I did leave him that choice. I wanted him, say in case that I died and I wasn't around, I wanted him to be able to assimilate into the system if he had to, right? So what I did is I used every single possible resource I could. I did my own private school. I had him enrolled in not only different homeschooling programs, because there was stuff that I can't teach. I could never teach algebra or math or anything like that. So I would find a homeschooling group that co-opt these courses, where other homeschooling kids would go as well, and he would learn a few things there 1 or 2 days a week. I had him enrolled in Mensa. I had him enrolled in loads of different things. And I did this with pennies, by the way. I was struggling as a single mom, so I did not have money to go hire a tutor. I had to be really resourceful myself. And then I became a National Geographic educator, and the education system, Eugene, that I actually used, I created. It's called the Raising a Revolutionary Education System, and it's very much based upon that story by the beach that I told you guys about. That is how I started to do the lessons. I framed each year. We had 4 terms throughout the year. We would have mini mesters, summer mesters. We did like a year-round education. I incorporated a whole lot of neuroscience and brain hacks into not just what he was learning or how he was learning, but it was, you know, how he could optimally absorb the information in those moments. You know, for instance, if there was a tough time going on and we were having a tough time in our family, I knew that I could adjust the learning for his brain to be able to absorb it. And I went and learned all of this. I learned about myelination of the nerve sheath. I learned about, you know, how to keep the body and brain in a parasympathetic dominant state in order to learn. Because that's one thing about our schools, especially in the US, is there's so much rigid fear and just do it this way, that a lot of times our kids aren't learning because their stress levels are so high. And we can't learn when we are in a state of fight or flight. It's physiologically impossible to learn new information. We can use old information, but we can't learn new information. So I continued to design around that, and it changed with every year and every life stage that Hudson went through, and every social stage and what was going on in the world. And, you know, and I just continued to mold it that way. But I do have curricula that I have and designed and I share, and I've taught other classes and things like that from it. So I hope that answered your question.
Quick question, a follow-up question to that. How were you able to maintain your life just because, you know, all the things that you are just mentioning requires a lot of significant like time commitment and effort. So how were you able to do anything else? Or another, I guess another way to ask that question, did you have other students in your school? Yeah, just curious.
Yeah, and Sam, it's a very honest and it's a vulnerable answer. And the truth of the matter is sometimes I don't know how I did it, but I'll be very honest with all of you. I had 6 or 7 jobs at once. I would be teaching. I taught at a homeschool co-op. I taught teen leadership and entrepreneurship. And I also taught the power of speaking impeccably. A couple courses that I designed at home, I would teach at the co-op. And so that was just a blessing, right? Because I could take Hudson there and I could teach. And I was a bartender. I also taught online. I acted, I modeled, I would go on castings whenever I could. Hudson would come with me very often. I also, when I wasn't doing all of those side hustles, I owned a business, and it was a women's empowerment business. And I would set Hudson's curricula up for the day, and he came with me to my office, and he had his curricula. He would interact with my clients, give them their sheets and their tea, welcome them to the office, and then we worked together as a team. And so I guess in short is I hustled my ass off, and Hudson and I worked together as a team, and we
did.
still do to this day. But that's it. And it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't easy. And sometimes you're like, I'm sorry, how did you do that?
She's really just an octopus with 8 arms. She can do most things. So
네.
Oh my gosh.
So,
But
thank you.
teamwork.
Yeah, thank you for sharing even your
Yeah.
vulnerable moments. Let me just quickly talk about that. 예, 그래서 정말 대단하신 분인 것 같아요. 싱글 엄마로서, 그러니까 싱글 맘으로서 이렇게 아들을 혼자 키우시는데 이게 그냥 약간 아들의 포커스를 둬서 진짜 모든 것을 하죠. 요즘 그 N 잡더라고 하죠. 잡이 정말 많은 진짜 문어처럼 뭐 8개, 뭐 10개 모든 직업이란 직업은 다 하시면서 또 거기에 또 아들을 중심을 둬서 또 아들을 홈스쿨링을 시키기 때문에 또 어디 가서 어디서 그러니까 모든 것을 본인께서 다 가르쳐 주실 수 있는 게 아니기 때문에 그런 곳에 가르쳐 줘서 거기서 허슨도 같이 보낼 수 있도록 또 하시고 하여튼 이러한 것들이 정말 대단한 것 같습니다. 근데 제가 어저께인가 그저께인가 그 인형인가 라방할 때도 그랬는데 아들들이 엄마한테 제일 그러니까 아들들이 나이가 들면서 제일 중요한 게 뭐냐면은 엄마에게 진짜 리스펙트 하는 거. 그러니까 엄마가 진짜 이런 모습들을 보는 얼마큼 열심히 하는지를 보여주고 그러니까 뭐 엄마가 미팅을 하거나 사업하거나 그럴 때 허슨을 직접 데리고 가서 많이 보여주시면서 또 참여하기도 하고 이러신 걸로 알고 있거든요. 그래서 아이가 엄마를 진짜 존경할 수 있는 그게 특히 아들들은 제일 중요한 것 중에 하나인 것 같습니다. 그러니까 둘 딱 본다 하더라도 딱 허슨이 엄마를 굉장히 존경을 지금 하고 있는 게 느껴지시죠? 사랑하고 존경하는 모습이. 네, 그래도 정말 존경스러우신 분이시네요. I mentioned that. Hudson, let me ask you this question. How because one of the things I say about raising sons, especially, I think the importance of having sons respect their mom. I think that is quite important. Because as when you're a teenager, you sort of rebel against a lot of sons I see like rebel against their especially moms. And so,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about your relationship with your mom.
yeah, that's
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, the whole rebelling thing is definitely a stereotype and
Oh.
something that I don't think really happened in our family. Like we said before, it's been a team. We've worked together. There's been a lot of teamwork. Not respecting my mom isn't really has never been in the question. But yeah, it's just been synergistic. It's been a family. It hasn't really been something I've had to consciously think about and like remind myself not to, I don't know, toilet paper someone's house or spray paint the car. Like I don't like rebel like that. I'm sure there have been instances where we've disagreed, and of course there have been, but it's definitely not to the extent of like the Hollywood stereotype. There's always been mutual respect, but it's also a big thing.
That's a good point.
Yeah, mutual respect. It's because she has obviously across the almost 18 years, she's nurtured me, she's respected me, she's listened to my opinions, she's had conversations with me, and there hasn't been necessarily like I didn't suddenly get more respect when I turned 10 or 13 when I became a teenager, or even 18. It's always been a consistent, massive just discussion and focus on me. So I didn't really feel like I had to prove anything to her. I didn't have to. There wasn't a lack within me, if that makes sense.
Or I didn't give you a box to break out of.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good analogy.
You're never in a box, period.
No.
Okay,
To the point where go ahead.
Yeah, to the point where similar to getting a little angry when she didn't answer some of my questions, not having a box and not basically having all the doors wide open, all the opportunities I could ever have in a lot of ways, made it so that at sometimes I just it didn't necessarily make sense to me. It seemed like because so many doors were open at the time that I couldn't choose any of them because there were just so many. It was almost like analysis paralysis to an extent, but before that term came around. And there have been a few times where it hasn't felt comfortable. It hasn't always just been daisies. And having all those doors open has proven to be a stressor some amount of the time. But whenever I then am able to pull a string and find a tangent and dive into one of my passions, and that's where all those doors come into play. And especially as I'm, coming into adulthood and looking at universities, I'm just finding that to be more and more valuable.
Well, thank you for sharing that. One follow-up question, Hudson, if I may.
Yes.
Have you ever wanted to sort of be in the sort of the normal, right? Those who, I'm sure you've had friends who went to school, right? The traditional school. Have you ever missed or thought about wanting to join that side?
Of course, yes. I have thought about it, and all of my friends, a lot of my friends are also older than me. I don't have many friends my age just because I don't really get along with many kids my age. One of my best friends is 18, but most of my friends are older. So, but yeah, there was a time like when it would have been my age when I turned 13, like high school is high school thing. Like we even had that discussion
Yeah.
too. And she opened that door for me. And that was it's almost similar to the college ideal in universities and how that has waned in recent years, but also the high school ideal. What you see in the movies and everything, that's not exactly how it is. And I was still able to recognize that. And I said no just because of the way that even though I may have wanted a typical or standard experience at times, it was always much more beneficial to me. And I realized that like a few months after, a few years after, and now, especially now after that I'm just very glad I chose not to do that, because that gives me a unique perspective on the world, that also in my friend groups, I'm the one who still fits in, but it gives me so much to talk about. I've been able to have so much experience at an early age, traveling the world, learning different languages, being my own entrepreneur, working with my mom on businesses. We've just been able to do so much cool stuff at the end of the day. And that really has just been, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. 네. 딱 지금 얘기할 때 되게 눈이 반짝반짝 그러지 않나요? 저는 그게 되게 느껴지고 있는데, 두 분이 너무 말을 잘하고 또 아들도 말을 너무 잘하고 있죠. 제가 질문을 물어본 게, 그러니까 그래도 홈스쿨링을 하면서 그냥 어떻게 보면 친구들이나 다른 아이들은 기존 그냥 일반 학교를 다니고 있기 때문에 언제라도 그런 걸 한번 체험해보고 싶었지 않았나. 그러니까 너무 어릴 때부터 쭉 홈스쿨을 했기 때문에 그 질문을 했었습니다. 근데 여기서 또 중요한 것은 엄마가 그 문은 항상 열어두셨었어요. 네가 원하면은 그냥 뭐 일반 뭐 공립이든 학교를 갈 수 있게, 기존적인 그런 시스템에 들어갈 수 있게 문은 항상 열어두시면서 너의 약간 의견과 너의 생각을 되게 존중을 해주신 게 제일 큰 핵심 포인트인 것 같습니다. 그래서 네, 지금 인형님께 적어주듯이 지금 이런 것들이 여태까지 했던 것들이 절대 모든 것들이 후회 없다고 네, 합니다. So, Carmell, do you want to talk about what the things that you're doing now?
Yeah,
I wanna be
absolutely.
sure to yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, as I was mentioning, it was for years I've been like kind of squirreling away all of the curricula and all of the different things that I've done in hopes that I might be able to kind of shape it and share it at some point. And I'm finally there where I can step out and share more of what I'm doing. So we have the integrity economy. Hudson and I have had the integrity economy for years, and we're starting to really build more around that. Our podcast is still, we've filmed ones, but it's on me. I haven't gotten to publishing them. Totally my fault. Where we're going to be sharing like our story, but the integrity economy is also about regenerating humanity and seeking solutions and doing things that regenerate humanity. So one of the things that we're still working on is we have a pilot seaweed farm over in Albania, and we actually are up for a possible grant to get that going. And that coincides with Hudson's ag plant science degree. By the way, he's probably going to choose Cornell.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and leak it.
That's number one.
That's number one.
Okay.
But we're doing that. The integrity economy is ongoing, but I have started to speak more, and I'm looking for more public speaking engagements where I'm sharing about how to raise men differently, because I've raised a boy, and it's really about what if we were to raise our young men with a sense of self-worth. How would that transform leadership today, right? If as parents and as society, I feel that so often we hijack what our kids are here to do. And then so at a very young age, they lose sight of themselves. And I wanted to say back a little while ago when I was talking about how I did all of this, and sometimes I don't know how, I want to be very, very transparent about the fact that, you know, I've been exhausted to the point of don't know if I'm actually going to be able to pull this off. But what it was for me is to continue to preserve Hudson, because as a parent, I brought him into this place, and that's the least I can do for him. So in those times, like you guys, I'm sure, get incredibly exhausted as parents, that's what I dug into. It's about him. It's about giving him the tools to thrive and to create the world he wants. It's not about me, right? Other than obviously taking basic care of myself, but and that was what did it for me in those times of exhaustion. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. But I have the maverickmamamethod.com, which is a course that I'd put together. It's a basic toolbox for parents. It's very raw. It's very relatable. It's not fancy. But I have this course that I put together where I talk about relationships with devices, where I talk about balance, where I talk about raising kids with emotional intelligence. So I've got that at the maverickmamamethod.com. And like I said, I'm beginning to speak more and getting out there and sharing kind of how I think if we all tapped into our own value and kept our kids' value intact, then really it can transform leadership as we see it today. And I think we can all agree maybe our leadership in this world needs some new rebar.
Sure.
Thanks, Sam.
Do you mind putting the URL in the chat?
Oh, of course.
I put the first one, but the second one. 네. 그래서 지금 잠깐 인연님께서 자리를 잠깐 비우셔서 그러니까 아들과 그렇게 한 약간 그 스토리를 담아서 여러 가지 코스를 또 가르쳐주고 계세요. 그래서 지금 저기 그 대화창에 보시면 링크가 있습니다. 그래서 나중에 관심 있으시면 보시면 좋을 것 같아요. 근데 거기에 이제 들어간 거 중에 뭐 몇몇 가지가 제가 잠깐 질문을 먼저 할게요. Hudson, quick question. When did you first get your mobile device?
I first got my first got my first phone when I was 16.
16. 네.
Yeah.
지금 제가 언제 첫 전화기를 가졌냐 물어봤을 때 뭐 만 16살이라고 했습니다. 그러니까 지금 요즘은 어린 아이 때부터 기계를 지어주고 있죠. 그래서 약간 그런 거의 중요성, 또 그게 또 두뇌 개발에 어떤 영향을 미치는지 이런 거 관련된 것들을 약간 그런 코스 같은 거를 많이 만들어서 네, 가르쳐주고 계세요. 아마 이 칼멜 어머님께서 아들을 위해서 진짜 너무 많은 막 연구를 하고 조사를 하고 이러시다가 보니까, 근데 그게 막 8개의 알바를 뛰시면서 그걸 하신 거죠. 진짜 대단하신 건데, 그러면서 진짜 여태까지 쌓아오시는 그런 데이터들이 정말 많아요. 그리고 또 그거를 직접 아들과 같이 했기 때문에, 그래서 그런 거를 토대로 이런 지금 약간 아들과 이런 사업 같은 것도 하고 있고, 또 허슨 같은 경우에는 you're going to cows, right? Yeah.
That is number one. Yeah, the cows program.
Okay, right.
The
You know-
choice. Yeah, hoping so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also like college consultant, so yeah, I know exactly what that program is. So, but yeah, one of the best. 그래서
That's awesome.
지금 허슨 같은 경우는 그 2년제 졸업장이 벌써 4개가 있는데 만 17살이고, 근데 그거를 싸가지고 이번에 이제 편입을 해야 되나? 4년제로 들어가요. 근데 그게 코넬 농대로 들어갑니다. 지금 하고 있는 것 중에 하나가 그 해초 농장을 둘이 또 해서 둘이 만들어서 또 하고 있어요. 그 엄마랑 아들이랑 같이 해서. 그러니까 약간 항상 이렇게 세계를 이렇게 돌아다니면서 이런 사업 기회도 많이 보시고 또 어떻게 이런 사회 세계의 이런 문제 같은 것을 같이 보고 또 그 아까 그 해파리 같은 거 예를 들었듯이 계속 조사를 하고 이러다 보면서 네, 지금 해초 농장을 결국에는 네, 둘이 오픈을 했습니다. 그래서 그런 걸 토대로 이제 지금 허슨 같은 경우는 지금 만 17살인데 그럼 3학년으로 들어가는 거겠네요. 콜넬 농대로 그게 이제 College of Agriculture and Life Science라고 그 분야에서는 미국에서는 랭킹 1위 학교입니다. 그래서 네. 그러니까 지금 딱 오늘 세션에 들으셨겠지만 딱 이렇게 얘기하는 모습 또 엄마랑 서로 마주보면서 대화하는 모습 이게 그냥 되게 자연스러워 보이지 않아요? 저는 그게 되게 인상 깊은데 이게 단순히 막 야 네가 얘기해 뭐 이런 것도 아니고 너무 지금 자연스럽게 대화가 나오고 있고 또 진짜 17살인데 여기 진짜 모든 성인들 대상으로 물론 뭐 줌으로 근데 저는 줌으로 하거나 실제 만나서 하는 거랑 큰 차이가 없을 것 같아요. 허스는 자기 말을 너무 잘 전달할 수 있고 소통을 잘할 수 있는 그러니까 진짜 저희가 흔히 요즘 많이 얘기하는 미래 교육, 미래에 필요한 스킬 이런 것들을 다 갖추고 이미 있는 것 같아요. 네, 그래서 어, 어, 오늘 꼭 그래서 소개시켜 드리고 싶었던 거고 그다음에 그 지금 위에 좀 적어 주셨는데 적고 허슨이 적고 있는데 네, 혹시 지금 그러니까 어떻게 해서 16살까지 기계를 지어주지 않고 또 근데 Hudson, were you unhappy that like you weren't getting your device till 16? Did you
Uh,
ever really
yeah,
like beg your mom to get you a device?
yeah, I did definitely did want a phone because a lot of other kids my age had one, but because I had traveled the world, at the time I had friends in Mexico, I had friends in Virginia, I had friends in California, and to keep in contact with them and to nurture those friendships, I obviously needed to keep in touch with them. So I did have my own computer that I mainly used for talking with friends and doing my schoolwork. But then if I wanted to do any social time or social media, I just used my mom's phone. But I didn't have my own personal phone until I was 16.
But we did schedule into learning into his daily curricula or lesson. And there was a certain amount of time always scheduled in for social media time.
Yeah.
I didn't like shun him from it, right? But at the same time, I also helped you know exactly kind of how it works with your brain.
Yeah.
So I let him know how digital dopamine works. And so he knew it wasn't just like, this is a rule mom made, this is actually for your well-being. You first, then the phone.
Yeah.
You're the boss of the phone instead of
More
the other way
science
around.
backed than another thing.
Yeah.
One thing I just wanted to mention as well is that even when I did graduate from my mom's high school and was accepted into college at age 13, 14, our education didn't stop. She still taught me, we still did our curriculum as we at that time, as we traveled across the US and then went across abroad to Europe, we still did our own education and we still did our own curriculum in addition to me doing my first couple of semesters of college. So I just wanted to mention that.
이제 엄마가 만든 그러니까 홈스쿨 그 고등학교를 졸업하고 나서도 또 세계를 또 돌아다니고 미국을 돌아다니면서도 계속 그 배움은 계속 계속했다고 합니다. 그리고 네, 13살, 14살 때 이미 고등학교 커리큘럼을 그때 다 마치고 이제 미국에서는 이제 2년제 대학으로 그거를 곧바로 시작을 했었고 근데 그걸 배우고 있었지만은 네, 엄마랑 계속 그러니까 어떻게 보면 인생 교육인 거죠. 세상을 돌아다니면서 실제 부딪히고 경험하는 것을 토대로 네, 항상 모든 순간이 배울 수 있는 순간, 그 러닝 모멘트를 네, 그냥 일상에서 그런 것들이 좀 나온 것 같습니다. 그래서 그런 거를 토대로 지금 막 그 레슨 같은 거 가르쳐주고 있으니까 그리고 또 만약에 관심 있으시면 여기 허슨이 코드까지 넣었네요. K-Moms 100이라고 넣어서 뭐 혹시 관심 있으시면은 뭐 직접 한번 가 보셔서 참여해 보시는 것도 되게 괜찮을 것 같아요. 요즘 그러니까 특히 아들 키우는 게 쉽지는 않고 또 진짜 이 세상 빠르게 변하고 있는 세상 또 지금 인공지능과 또 여러 가지 이 기계 역량은 어떤 건지 되게 질문들이 되게 많으실 것 같아요. 그래서 그런 것들을 약간 사이다처럼 이렇게 좀 이렇게 푸실 수 있는 기회가 되시지 않을까라고 네, 생각이 됩니다. 그래서 네, 진짜 계속 얼굴을 보고 있더라도 너무 둘이 너무 다정하고 너무 네, 정말 대단하지 않아요? 저는 그렇게 지금 느껴지고 있는데 이게 흔히 볼 수 있는 케이스가 아니거든요. 17살짜리 아들과 엄마와 둘이서 저렇게 진짜 다정하게 너무 서로를 잘 이해하면서 서로 잘 공감을 하면서 또 존경을 하면서 존중을 해주고 이런 모습들이 네, 딱 그 허슨의 자존감, 자신감 뭐 이런 걸 본다 하더라도 거의 최고인 것 같습니다. Yeah, anything else you'd like to add, or maybe should we go to like the chat to just ask? I know the time is like past midnight in Korea. Maybe ask some questions, or do you want to add anything at the end, or?
We can add things as the questions come, but I
Okay.
think yeah.
Sounds good.
Just want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know it's late for you guys.
Yeah, thank you all for
Right.
staying on.
Thank you for staying on as well. 한국은 지금 밤 12시가 넘었죠. 그래서 되게 늦은 시간인데 늦은 시간까지 여기 지금 계속 해주셔서 너무 감사하고 혹시 질문이 있으시면 뭐 영어로든 한국어로든 상관없습니다. 대화창에 적어주시거나 아니면 질문이 아니고 그냥 이 두 분께 하고 싶은 말씀이 있으셔도 적어주셔도 좋을 것 같습니다. 그래서 지금 한 10분 동안 질의답 시간을 갖고 마무리를 하도록 하겠습니다. 그래서 질문이 있으시거나 하시고 싶은 말씀이 있으시면 대화창에 영어든 한국어든 적어주세요. Yeah, so one of the things, so I asked them to write their question in the chat box, but I did mention that the way you guys look at each other, look at one another, it's so, you can see like how much you love one another and respect each other, and yeah, it's like really great thing to see. That's one of the things I mentioned to the audience here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's real. I have such respect for my son as a person. I get a little choked up here, besides being his mom, I'm in awe of him, and yes, he's smart. Sure, he's smart. Yes, he's cute, all of the things, but I'm in awe of him as a human and the way that he shows patience for people, me, very much so, the way that he'll draw a boundary and not let me or anybody else, kind of get in his space, or the way he treats his friends. I love it, but it's not in the way of you're a good boy, because I've never ever raised him to be a good boy. I actually don't really appreciate that. You're not here to like be a good boy and abide by all of the rules. You're here to be yourself. And so I love that he has this balance of I'm a kind human being, I'm a kind man, but I'm also not a doormat. And I did work for that. I absolutely worked toward making sure, like, yes, it's important that you have manners. It's important that you understand, different cultural intelligences and norms and things like this. But it's also important that you're not gonna like let people walk all over you out there. And I'm in awe of him every day. And so that's what you see from me. It's certainly authentic.
As you can probably see, it's hard for me to keep my ego in check.
Yeah.
Sure, sounds good. 또 이제 하신 지금 방금 하신 말씀은 그러니까 아이를 순종하고 말을 잘 듣는 아들을 키우려고 해본 적은 단 한 번도 없다고 하신다고 하십니다. 그러니까 말 잘 듣는 아이가 솔직히 이 험한 세상에서 그리고 빠르게 변하는 세상에서 무엇이 의미가 있을까요? 라는 그런 마인드로 그러니까 그렇지만은 뭐 당연히 매너가 있고 남을 존중해주고 이런 것도 되게 중요하고 그런 것을 중시였지만은 그래도 네, 그 아들만의 약간 그 뭐라 그럴까 공간을 제공해주고 또 그 안에서 또 자기 생각을 키워나가고 자기가 하고 싶은 말을 할 수 있고 그런 공간을 만들어주셨다는 게 되게 큰 것 같아요. 그냥 단순히 이거 해라 뭐 부모가 시켜서 하는 게 아니고 아이가 주도해서 아이가 원해서 하도록 그런 환경과 그러니까 그런 환경을 만들어주시기 위해서 진짜 끊임없는 대화와 아들을 공감을 해주시고 그랬던 모습들이 이제 딱 잘 보이는 것 같습니다. 그래서 질문들이 있어서 제가 그걸 전달해 드리겠습니다. 또 질문이 있으시면 대화창에 적어주시고요. So first question that I see, oh, has there ever been a time when you were really, really mad or angry at Hudson, or to the point where I guess you're like almost like pissed off at Hudson?
Yeah, actually. And I just want to like say to you guys, like you're getting a very like I'm an incredibly direct and transparent person. So when you ask something, I'm going to be very honest, and it's not always going to be pretty. Yeah, I've been pretty pissed at him, and you know what it's been for? Yeah, it's because sometimes, you know, he doesn't like put the dishes away whenever I want him to, like that's one of the things, right? But one of the things that I get pissed about is that I end up, because I get pissed at myself afterwards, I'll go ahead and I'll get to the end of it right now, but I get pissed because he doesn't seem to use all of the tools that have been provided for him. And then I have to, and I go, but Hudson, like you seriously have all of these things that you could do X, Y, Z with, right? Then what do I have to do? I have to check myself and realize, hey, he's still just 17. He's still just 15, you know, come on, self, you've got to realize. And I think much to the chagrin, I externally process. So as much as I get pissed in the moment, you know, at him, no, there's no poker face here. But I talk about it and I go, you know, Hudson, that was entirely uncool of me. I think sometimes I put too much expectation and I need to slow my roll. I need to back off, you know? And so I'll do this whole, and he just, and here's Hudson. He's kind of like, I was wondering when you'd realize you were an idiot. Of course he doesn't say that, right? But he's just like observing me going, okay, did you kind of, you know, did you kind of make it through your circle there? And that's one of the things about you, is that you just, you observe me in my thing and you're like, are you done yet?
Yeah, that also plays into different facets of my life too, though. Like I do internally process. I try not to have that be a bad trait of mine, but I do think a lot, and then I also tend to be the last one that does speak. I just observing, knowing, just getting the best lay of the land, if you will, before I claim to have something or throw down an opinion on a conversation.
Yeah, that's a trait I missed out on. Being the one to just observe and speak the least is not something I.
네, 아들이 정말 되게 성숙하네요. I'm just saying how mature you are, Hudson. 아들이 엄마가 막 그럴 때 잘 듣고 마지막에 또 답을 하는 약간 그런 거를 하고 있네요. 그래서 언제 화가 나냐면은 아들이 갖추고 있는 그 기술이라던가 툴이 많은데 그런 거를 제대로 활용하지 못할 때, 이것도 알고 이것도 알고 이것도 아는데 왜 그렇게만 답하니, 그렇게밖에 모르냐, 약간 이런 마인드가 있으셨을 때 제일 화가 나고 이런다고 합니다. 그런데 결국에는 그것도 이제 대화를 통해서 막 이렇게 화를 내다가도 내가 지금 왜 이러고 있지? 라고 생각을 하고 계시고, 또 아들도 일단은 그 얘기를 다 들어주고 결국에는 네, 답을 대화를 이렇게 해 나가는 것 같습니다. 그래서 되게 현명하고 네, 그러네요. 근데 이제 이게 분명히 오랜 시간 동안 그렇게 서로를 알고 대화를 하고 그런 내용이 쌓여 있었기 때문에 그게 다 가능한 것 같습니다. 그래서 다음 질문으로 또 넘어가겠습니다. So next question. There's a few questions. Maybe I'll try to go through. Maybe I'll combine some of these things for the time. What are the maybe 3 things that you consider most important when raising, you know, children? And if you cannot, let's say, compromise on one of these things, or some things, right? What would they be? So the next question.
Self-respect. That has to be, that ember has to be fanned.
Meaning for you as a mom, self-respect for you.
No, self-respect for you, like
Got it.
ensuring that you have your self-respect and whatever it takes to ensure that that happens, because you can't control the outside world, but you can control how you react to it. And so really that sense of self-worth, that sense of self-respect, it's like the concept of self. Another
while you think, maybe I'll translate in
Yeah.
between. 예, 본인을, 그러니까 아들 자기 자신 본인을 존중하고, 네, 그 막 아끼고, 그리고 나의 가치, 약간 이런 걸 생각하는, 그런 거를 만들어주시는 거, 환경을 만들어주시는 거를, 그러니까 자존감을 키우는 약간, 그런 걸 제일 중요하다고 여기십니다. Go ahead.
I guess another thing that it has been a non-negotiable for us, and it's more of just a tangible thing, it's language. You absolutely must learn languages. And for people in the United States, it's not mandatory for us to learn other languages in our school systems, which is unfortunate. You open so many doors, you get to know so many more facets about the world and about relationship. You know, we are humans. We are meant to be in relationship, in community. And if you're going to get out of your own echo chamber, you've got to learn another culture. And the best way to do that is language. And so that's a non-negotiable. You've got to learn other languages.
That's why we also love being in international cities. When we went to Istanbul, that was wonderful. Living in LA was also awesome. And where we are here now is also international. So always being in as much culture as possible is the big emphasis. I think it's always been.
Yeah. And I think,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry, just a quick question to Hudson. Yes, sorry to cut you off. Just while you were talking about languages, so Hudson, 한국에는 언제 올 계획이에요?
Oh, when did I
한국에는
start learning Korean? 언제?
한국에 언제 올 거예요? 한국에 언제 올 계획인가요? Do you know what that means?
I unfortunately do not know what that means. I'm sorry.
Oh, so when do you plan to come to Korea? That was my question. Or when are you planning to visit Korea?
Definitely want to aim from before I go to university next year. So,
okay.
I think we've shortened our trip to a long visit. I don't think we're going to come over for as long as we thought we were at this point, but
Okay.
Yes.
I'm sure there will be families who are willing to wanting to meet you. 그래서
Yeah,
원전해서
I just want to
sorry,
say
go.
that does sound lovely to meet everyone and also visit. Yes, still want to do that.
네, 허슨이 지금 한국어를 배우고 있거든요. 그래서 아주 두 번째 중요한 거 말씀하신 게 언어라고 하셨어요. 그래서 미국에서는 굳이 영어를 어차피 하고 있으니까 뭐 다른 언어가 꼭 필요한 건 아닌데 뭐 그나마 스페인어, 스페인계 사람 인구수가 높기 때문에 스페인어를 하면 뭐 좋겠지만 그 외에 꼭 언어에 대한 중요성을 많이 못 느끼고 있는 나라 중에 하나인데 물론 한국에서는 좀 다르죠. 영어를 다 하고 배우고 일단은 한국어, 영어는 기본으로 하고 그 외에도 제3 언어를 하는데 네, 그 언어의 중요성이라고 말을 했어요. 그래야 이제 그 언어만이 아니고 문화를 알고 진짜 많은 기회와 문을 열려면은 일단은 거기서 그게 언어로 시작하는 거다라고 생각을 해서 네, 지금 허슨 같은 경우는 영어와 스페인어도 하지만 지금 한국어 혼자서 그냥 배우고 있고 그리고 생각이 나는 게 한국어랑 이렇게 가르쳐주고 아이들이랑 이렇게 약간 수업이라기보다 그러니까 문화 그런 교환 이런 기회를 만들었으면 좋겠다는 생각이 얼핏 나네요. 허슨이랑 그리고 또 아랍 언어 이렇게 지금 배우고 있습니다. And Karma, if there's like one thing that you cannot compromise on, what would that be?
There you go.
One thing I cannot compromise on. Oh gosh.
A lot of things, but one umbrella term maybe.
Well, I mean, that's what I was saying, the sense of self-worth. And then I guess in that, it's just, it really is, you've got to relentlessly teach your children to want to understand themselves from anywhere, like what they eat and put in their body to how they interact with people outside. If you continue to reinforce how they know themselves, that then anything else is doable. And so that / Sam adaptability, you know, we have to know how to adapt in society. And in order to do that, I think you have to expose your children to lots of different things that might be uncomfortable for you or might be uncomfortable for them, or, you know, might have to get out of the comfort zones. Those things are super important because it's about that these things ultimately help them overcome obstacles and thrive. And so again, that's just that whole, it's a big slew of pouring into them.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have a direct answer.
And from my perspective, having been exposed to that multitude of things, I am able to come to decisions on my own about like, just I'm able to be independent in myself and look at who the person I want to be is, and basically my future self, and how can I best take care of my future self in order to achieve who I want to be in 2, 5, 10, 20 years. How can I best work towards that? And because of what I've learned, because of just how I've been taught to nurture myself, I do the best I can, and it's definitely obviously not perfect, but it's always a work in progress to become like my ideal. And so if that makes sense.
But you also appreciate who you are, where you are
in the
now,
present moment
right?
as well. Yeah. Balancing those two.
네. 저 인형님하고 가연님 너무 감사드립니다. 또 계속 번역을 해주시고 계셔가지고 네, 제가 좀 더 질문하고 답에 집중을 할 수가 있는데 네, 약간 그 칼멘님께서 말하시는 것 중 하나가 또 그 어댑터빌리라고 말씀하셨어요. 그런데 이제 세상은 빨리 변하고 있고 진짜 어떻게 보면 더 무서워지고 있는 세상이기도 한 것 같아요. 그래서 그런 사회에서 그런 세상에서 또 기계가 빨리 발달되는 세상 안에서 적응력, 그러니까 어떻게 보면은 서바이벌 스킬일 수도 있는 거죠. 살아남을 수 있는 것, 어떤 게 부딪혀도 어떤 기술이 변화가 온다 하더라도 사회가 어떻게 변하던 견뎌낼 수 있고 버틸 수 있고 또 그 안에서도 성공할 수 있는 그런 능력을 키우는 게 저도 그건 네, 공감합니다. 제일 필요한 스킬인 것 같아요, 미래에. 네, 지금 계속 질문 시간이 너무 돼가지고 그러면은 번역을 해주셔가지고 감사합니다. 또 혹시 제가 놓친 거 있나 한번 가볼게요. There's a question about question about time, like reading time. So, how many hours or minutes or hours like did you read when you were young? Did you enjoy it yourself, or you sort of the in terms of like the book genres or titles, like were you recommended these things by Carmell or others, or how did you pick and choose the books and yeah, talk to us about
Yeah,
reading.
that's a fantastic question that might be my favorite one so far, because back when I was some of the fondest memories of my childhood, I know I'm still a childhood, but my early on childhood was when I was let's say 8 through 11. And in that time, I remember I have my kitty Beastie, who's here right now. She's a black cat. I went up into my loft where I slept, and I opened the windows, and I made myself tea, and I would lay down on the floor on my bed with my cat and sip my tea and read books and just dive into these worlds for hours, day on day, month on month, year on year, and just having the sunlight with the literature, and it just created, it made me feel like the house was mine, the world was mine. I was able to tap into those worlds with my cat and at an early age, and those are just some of my favorite memories. But specifically titles early on, they're still some of my favorite series today, but the Lord of the Rings original series, the trilogy from that, and then also Harry Potter. I did have a big Harry Potter phase when I was 9 and 10. And so those books are still, I would say, monumental to like graduating from smaller storybooks to larger chapters and larger books after that, bigger volumes. And then I've gotten into more sciencey and geopolitical books lately, but I would say, was it Magic Treehouse too early on?
Very, very early on, it was this series called Magic Treehouse that Hudson read that really got him to be an independent reader.
And I wanted to say too, I've been a voracious reader, so I started reading chapter books much earlier than my I guess counterparts.
Mhm.
And I've always had a nose in my book, and
Always.
yeah, on our road trips, I mom got a little annoyed at me because I just had my head in the book and I was getting dizzy as we were driving, and I like couldn't take my eyes away for like, probably a solid week as I was reading this one big book. It was the Ballad of Mockingbirds and Birds and Snakes. It was the prequel to the Hunger Games, and I read that when it came out in 2020. But I've more recently I've had less time to read, or I've given myself less time to read, but I still in my morning routine make time to read the new books that I'm reading now. So it's still very important to me, and I do love it.
If you guys have a translation or even, you know, the English one, the book that really pulled
Yeah.
Hudson like from reading smaller books into it was the precursor to Lord of the Rings for Hudson, and it's called Redwall by Brian Jacques. And it's just, this book was so formative for him as a young man, and it's about these forest creatures who live like a King Arthur style. That's another favorite of his, but a
Yes.
King Arthur style kind of life and their adventures in the forest. And it's got squirrels and these field mice and things like that. But the writing in
So
Redwall
eloquent.
is great for the young kids. Not super young. I think that, you know, you read them a little early, but they're brilliant,
I did.
brilliant books. So I
And-
think you're popping it in the chat right now.
I did, yeah. I'm finding a link to a Korean version right now. But when did I read
Redwall?
Tolkien?
Tolkien?
It was 10, I think.
10.
Sorry, that was a lot.
Oh no, that's all right, because I think yeah, I have that real-time translation going on. So
Oh yeah.
but I guess you probably one of the few people who would actually understand my first son's name. His first my first son's name is Aragorn.
Really?
Are you
Yeah.
serious?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, seriously. So Aragorn is his
Wow.
first name. So and I think, yeah, we go through the same thing. So we're
That's
on
awesome.
like cross country trips in US, and then he would just put his head down and read the whole time, and he get nauseated. And, yeah. So remind me, your comments reminded me of my son.
That's a fantastic name, a fantastic choice, and that's cool to know that I'm not alone with getting dizzy in the car. I also, I mean, I guess if he's gotten a chance to read the actual books yet, but just because that is his name, I bet he soon will look forward to going to New Zealand too. I know that's always been like a dream of mine, to go to where Lord of the Rings was filmed, and the helicopter tours and stuff like that. But yeah, that's really cool.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we definitely have to talk about that later.
Yeah.
네, 제 큰아들 이름이 아라곤이라서 반지대왕 주인공 이름이거든요. 그래서 딱 들어보시면, 네, 진짜 책에 대한 사랑이 그대로 느껴지시죠. 기계 지어주지 마시고 책을 지어주시는 게 제일 중요한 것 같습니다. 제 아들도 약간 그런 게 있는데, 장기 막 자동차로 여행 갈 때 책을 엄청 싸가요, 저희는. 근데 그래서 막 되게 고민을 해요. 그래도 막 이렇게 오랜 시간 동안 차에 앉아 있으니까, 막 미국에서는 여기서 막 지금 계시는 막 플로리다 쪽으로 간다 그런다면은 18시간 운전을 해야 되거든요. 그러면 그 시간을 어떻게 메꾸지라고 되게 고민이 많은데, 그래도 다행히 이제 익숙해진 게, 저 아이들은 책을 읽는데 막 멀미가 나죠. 막 멀미가 나서 막 토도 한 적도 있어요. 그런데 근데 약간 허슨이 그랬다고 해서, 네, 저도 약간 반가워했었던 거였습니다. 그만큼 책을 사랑하고 책을 많이 읽고, 또 주신 책들이 있으니까 그것도 한번 꼭 보도록 네, 해주세요. Alright, maybe I'll take a couple more questions because I think, yeah, we're really running late. 12:30 in Korea. So 질문 몇 개만 더 받을게요. 너무 지금 늦어지고 있는 것 같아가지고 나머지는 또 다음에 또 기회를 어떻게 만들어 보도록 하겠습니다. 아니면 제가 질문을 받아서 저 뭐 대화창이라든가 그 정리를 해서 제가 뭐 소셜 미디어라든가 아니면은 저 카톡방에 올려드리겠습니다. Next question. So it must have been very tough. I mean, yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine or fathom doing research and coming up with curriculum for Hudson while having many jobs. is that really because, not that is that really because, but what really drove you? Is it really like your sort of penchant towards like wanting to learn? So like self-education, continuing education, was that the big sort of driver, or was it really just really focused on Hudson and trying to come up with the best like lesson plan for Hudson? So you know this person is curious as to you know what drove you more and how she could sort of be like you and like, come up with things with her child.
Yeah, I'd say it, even though I did learn a lot, and I'm still learning a lot, because like Hudson said earlier, we actually still have, you know, we still hold forum, we still have certain classes and things that we do together, because you just continue to learn. But so collaterally, I learned, and I became a more sentient, more emotionally intelligent person, and better read as well as all of this went on. But it was absolutely for him. It was not for me. It was absolutely for him. It was, and it is, because I knew I sensed with, you know, our mama senses, when he was in my womb, I sensed that, you know, he has gifts and is a gift, and I was going to do whatever it took to make sure that those gifts are preserved. And when I think today, you know, it's about casting that ripple, because I know that, again, this isn't like because he's my son, but I just know that there's good out in the world that is going to ripple out from him, and we need that. And so I feel the more as parents that we can see and sense that in our children, and do whatever it takes to make sure that they get a chance to share it all, or to share even a slice of it, it's of utter importance. It's like, it's our duty as parents, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you for that. So again, for lack of time, I'll just go straight to next question. Kind of maybe related. So Hudson must have had like a period of puberty as well. Yeah, so talk about sort of, you know, that period. Maybe getting opinion or just reflection from both of you.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, again, being as just kind of open and as transparent as I am, I was ready for it. You know, I was like, I definitely, I got out there and I learned more. Obviously, I'm a woman. I have a woman's body and a woman's development. And but what we did from a very early age is we just had a very open conversation about sexuality, sensuality. There was never like any shame around our bodies. There was never any shame around the different ways that people express sexuality, anything like that. So when we got to puberty's door, you know, and I had already dove into the neuroscience piece of puberty as well. And so I kind of, I knew where to go there. We just talked about stuff. And of course, there are times where he was just like, really, Mom, are you going to want to talk with me about this now? But yeah, you know, and we talked about everything, and not just him and his body, but also the woman's body. And as she develops, and understanding our periods, and understanding the different transformations that women go through. And so it wasn't just not having shame about your body or your coming of man, but it was also understanding women, and just, you know, that women are also just absolutely different and diverse. And I don't know, it's just always been something that we've been super open about. Again, I'm like the one who talks about stuff more than others. And I guess one more quick thing about that is Hudson was around different teenagers a lot. You know, he wasn't like isolated in some little bubble. And so he would get to see other things that were going on and discern and go, huh, I'm curious about that, or I don't really think I like that so much. So he got to kind of see and reflect, and then he would come home and talk to me about different things that other kids were doing, not as in like tattle, but more as in like, why? I don't really understand that. And so we would just, you know, take it right then and there.
That also, just a slight tangent here, but plays into the stereotype about homeschooled kids or other alternatives of homeschool kids, that they're isolated, that they're stuck at home, that they don't have the school, so they obviously don't have any social life. And I can't speak for the entire, this kind of education, this education's entire community, but I can say for myself that because of the way I've been raised, I've been able to experience and see and meet with so many more people compared to had I had simply just been at one stationary school all my life. I've been able to see different cultures, languages, people, and meet so many different people, especially my age and older as well. Like I said, still my friends are older than me, just because it's kind of hard to find much relation between kids my age if I don't have like a long friendship with them built up, if that makes sense. But I know that's a tangent.
Yeah.
We're
So
not
the
isolated.
sexuality piece, the puberty piece.
Okay.
Yeah, for the sexuality piece, I think you pretty much summed it up. It was always a very comfortable question or discussion, and it didn't necessarily feel like much had changed, really. Like our dynamic didn't change. It was still the same. Yeah, I
guess
turned,
honoring your space. I mean, that was one thing, is that you have a sacred space,
Yeah.
like you have your own body, your own time. That's probably something huge that you.
that is, yeah, and I got into, like, I've always had obviously like my own room and my own care for myself. That wasn't just a puberty thing. But as I did start to, I became more attentive to my appearance, or probably, I wanted more time to myself, and
At what age did you have this conversation or start to have this conversation? Approximately.
well, 11.
I mean, puberty earlier than that. Like,
Does it happen earlier? Yeah, it
yeah.
is. Yeah, early 10, I would say.
Yeah, but I'd say always we spoke about sex and sexuality from a very young age.
Yeah.
That wasn't something
And
that
it's,
was.
never taboo or something to be ashamed of, and still isn't. So yeah.
Okay, great. 약간 성교육에 대해서 그것도 되게 중요한데, 네, 그거를 마지막 질문에는 어떤 번역도 잘 해주셔서, 통역을 잘 해주셔서 감사합니다. 언제 했냐 열어봤는데 그래도 한 10살 때. 근데 그 대화를 그냥 꾸준히 하고 서로의 공간을 존중해주고 그랬던 점이 제일 네, 중요했던 것 같습니다. 그래서 마지막에 한두 개 질문만 더 할게요. I think there was a question in English that I might have missed. Yes, right here. Didn't you ask your mother to use your phone more? Were you content about the time you used it? Yeah.
I saw that question pop across too. I just hadn't had a chance to address it yet. So the time that I did use my mom's phone for, I would be on social media. I would put up some posts on Instagram. I didn't necessarily, that was also before TikTok, but I didn't have other apps like Snapchat or Musical.ly or things like that. So I didn't necessarily have a desire to scroll at that point. I did want to get on and see like what cool things were happening in the world, but it pretty much viewed my mom's phone when I used it as a way to communicate with my friends. That wasn't necessarily a thing isolated for just, social media and just scrolling at that point. That's probably changed now for a lot of kids that are my age that I used to be. But I also used my computer mainly. So I did YouTube. I watched things on YouTube. I learned on my computer, and I would say a lot, the computer kind of replaced any gap that the phone, not having a phone, may have left. Yeah. But I don't feel, looking back on that, I don't feel lack. I don't feel like I necessarily needed to have one. And with video games too, I am glad that I didn't necessarily spend too much time on video games too, looking back, even though it might have been, if you had asked me 5 years ago, that I might have had a different response, but yeah.
So
He still wasn't just like allowed to go sit on his computer for hours at a time. And I also didn't allow, there were a couple things I just didn't allow. Like there were some games early on that were learning games that I was like, okay, we'll do these. But for instance, Fortnite was not an option here.
Yeah.
Well, kind of similar to in my family too. So. Music to my ears. All right, great. I guess maybe the final question, because again, it's quite late. Do you happen to know your MBTI? Have you done
Oh,
your personality
yes.
test?
I actually did that year and a half ago, and I believe I got the ENFJ. I got the protagonist, whatever the main character one is. That's the one I got. I think it's the ENFJ plus.
We haven't done it officially though. Like you just did it on one of those online surveys.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, just the online surveys, but it was one of the more professional looking
Yeah.
ones. But yeah,
That's
So
something really
ENFJ.
I believe so. Yeah, it was the protagonist. That one.
Okay. Carmel, how do you know yours?
I don't have a clue, Sam. Not a clue. I should probably do that because I really don't even know much about that.
It
I
would be
must
cool.
admit.
I would think it also changes, so I should probably take another one now that I'm older. But yeah, it's a fun thing to do.
오케이. 엄마는 아직은 모르신다고 합니다. 그래서 한번 보라고 하시는데 아마 분명히 앞에가 E는 확실히 붙으실 것 같아요. 두 분 다. 네, 너무 이렇게 네, 여러분 어떠셨어요? 이 두 분이 약간 대화하는 거와 지금 보면 너무 진짜 자연스럽고 네, 그냥 너무 딱히 얘기하는 모습만 봐도 정말 어떤 삶을 살아왔고 어떤 것을 가치관이 무엇이며 약간 이런 게 다 보이는 것 같아요. 그래서 이런 것들을 좀 네, 저도 본받아야 되겠다라는 생각을 정말 많이 느끼고 있습니다. 근데 특히나 아들과의 엄마 이런 모습이 정말 흔한 모습이 아니에요. 네, 거의 진짜 0.1%도 안 되는 그런 모습인 것 같은데, 네, 그래도 이제 어떻게 해서 여기까지 오게 됐는지 그걸 들으셨으니까, 어, 네, 혹시 더 궁금하시면은 이 칼멜 그 어머님께서 하시는 그런 코스를 참여해 보셔서 들으셔봐도 좋을 것 같고, 또 인스타그램 링크를 제가 올려드릴게요. 팔로우를 하셔서 I'm just gonna Carmel, if you want to post your Instagram
Yeah.
link to the
Yes.
chat box, that would be
And
great.
TikTok as
네,
well.
팔로우를 하셔서 질문을 이렇게 물어보시면 직접 답도 해주세요. 그래서 되게 이렇게 직설적으로 이렇게 돌려서 하시는 분이 아니세요. 그래서 궁금한 거 있으시면 질문을 하시면 아마 진짜 이렇게 답해 주실 분이십니다. Any parting words you want to mention?
Yeah, I do actually. If I don't know how this would work, Sam, but if anybody in here would like to do something that is a little more personal, perhaps I'm starting to share and do webinars and things like this that like specifically about raising young men, and about getting into more of the deeper stuff, more of the more personal, vulnerable stuff. If you know anybody that's interested in that, if you guys will reach out to me on Instagram or wherever, I would be more than happy to get something together that is just kind of hyper specific. Like if you want to ask questions that maybe we couldn't get to here, or, you want to get into deeper stuff. I'm really, really, about empowering our young men and kind of how that could help us all as women and in society and all men. And I'm still shaping this, as you can tell, but if you think anybody would like to learn more that way, then have them reach out. I don't know how we translate it. That might have to be you, or maybe Avery mom would like to do that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's something to think about. So if you guys want to do something like that, please just let me know. And I'd be more than happy just to hop on a call and we can make it like a happy hour, happy tea type thing, and just get down and personal about whatever. But this, I feel that there's just so much that can go into just empowering our kids as they are. I'm so grateful for all you guys. It's just thanks for letting us be here. Thanks for giving me, I'll speak for myself. Thanks for giving me a place to speak, Sam. I really appreciate it. Thank you all.
No, thank you. And thank you, Hudson, for your valuable time, spending your valuable time with us. And just the way you look at each other and the way you communicate and when you speak, you don't really have to tell us anything. Like we could sort of get a lot from just by the way you look at one another. So thank you for sharing your story too, and thank you for being very honest and vulnerable as well. 그리고 마지막으로 하신 말씀이 혹시나 이제 특히 아들을 키우시는 분들 많이 여기 계셔서 여기 늦은 시간까지 계시는 걸로 제가 생각이 되는데 되게 그러시면서 아들을 키우시면 이해 안 되시는 부분이 좀 많이 있으실 거예요. 특히 어머님들이 여기 거의 다 계시니까 직접 경험을 해보신 게 아니시기 때문에 그래서 혹시나 이제 좀 이렇게 소그룹으로 모인다던가 아니면은 뭐 웨비나 같은 거를 많이 하세요. 그래서 그러니까 질의답 시간을 조금 더 가져서 조금 더 개별적으로 이런 아이가 우리가 내 아들이 있는데 어떻게 하면 좋을까요? 약간 이런 개인적인 질문을 이렇게 하실 수 있는 공간도 만드실 계획이시거든요. 그래서 뭐 그런 거에 관심이 있으시면은 아까 그 인스타그램 링크를 올려드렸는데 네, 칼멜 어머니께 직접 메시지를 보내셔도 됩니다. 네. 너무 부담 갖지 말고 돌리세요. 그냥 어차피 아들도 한국어를 지금 배우고 있고 구글 번역기 돌려서 이렇게 하셔도 되고 또 직접 하시는 게 막 번역기를 직접 돌리세요. 그래서 한국어를 물어보시더라도 그 번역기 돌려서 사용하셔가지고 답변을 해 주실 거예요. 그래서 너무 진짜 열심히 하시는 분이십니다. 그래서 저도 너무 존경하고 또 네, 그렇게 힘들게까지 이렇게 살으셨는데도 불구하고 이렇게 멋진 아들을 키운 거에 정말 너무 큰 저는 네, 박수를 또 응원을 또 해드리고 싶습니다. And then Hudson, I want to give you space to any parting words for you.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. Thank you for obviously spending extra time. I know it's late for you guys, and especially just with the time difference. Thank you so much for spending the extra time with us and just being present here. And 감사합니다. 짤짤.
Yeah. 안녕히 주무세요. So
안녕히 주무세요.
yeah, 잘자 is like what you would say to your friends.
Oh,
So when you
I take
know
that
that
back.
in Korean, yeah, no, it's okay, it's okay. You're learning, right? So 안녕히 주무세요.
안녕히 주무세요.
Yeah, you're quite good. Yeah, that's exactly. And before you go, let me just take one photo or cut this photo quickly. So yeah, hold on a second. All right, great. Okay, thank you so much for your valuable time. 그리고 오늘 여기 늦은 시간까지 이제 거의 새벽 1시가 됐는데 참여해 주신 분들 너무 감사드립니다. 그리고 또 앞으로도 더 이런 기회를 더 많이 만들고 또 많이 알려주셨으면 좋겠어요. 이런 저희가 함께 했으면 좋겠습니다. 이게 이제 혼자서 하는 게 아니고 네, 같이 해서 같이 알아가고 같이 고민하고 같이 소통할 수 있는 기회가 좀 더 많았으면 좋겠습니다. 네, 늦은 시간까지 너무 감사드리고 everybody saying thank you and right, so have a good night and have a great morning for you. And 그러면 여기서 오늘 네, 끝내도록 하고 I'm going to share so I'll upload this on YouTube unlisted and then I'll share with everybody. 제가 이거 영상을 올려두고 또 녹화본을 링크를 공유해 드리겠습니다. 그리고 또 가은님 너무 또 가은맘님, 인형님하고 아까 가연님 너무 감사드립니다. 번역해 주셔서. Okay, all right.
please give all of your babies kisses for us. Good night. Sweet dreams, everybody.
Sweet dreams, everybody. 네, 그럼 들어가세요. 네. 네.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye,
Thank
bye,
you.
Hudson, bye, Carmell. Thank you so much. Bye, bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for having us.